Hello everyone, and welcome back to This Week in Mythic Plus. Now this week we have Bursting, Quaking, and Fortified, which makes a really bad combination. Let's go over the affixes first, and then we'll jump into the dungeon. For Bursting, whenever a non-boss enemy dies, everybody gets a debuff that makes them lose 10% of their HP over 4 seconds. And this effect does stack. That means if you kill 10 mobs, you will lose 100% of your HP over 4 seconds. With Quaking, every now and then, players will quake, which is an AoE around them. When that AoE is finished, that player will take 20% of their HP as damage and interrupt all spellcasting. And lastly this week we have Fortified, which means that non-boss enemies have more HP and deal more damage. Now tanks, this week it's very important to watch your healer's mana. If your healer gets too low, they won't be able to heal through 5 or 6 stacks of bursting. Also, something to note with bursting is to make your pulls maximum of 6 mobs at a given time. If you pull more than 6 mobs and get a quaking in between there, 6 mobs of bursting is 60% of your HP, 1 quake is 20%, you run the risk of dying to any other damage you'll take. So 6 mobs plus 1 quake is equal to 80% of your total life, unavoidable damage, guaranteed you'll get it. So keep the pulls to 6 mobs maximum. Also, because of quaking this week, you should be spreading out and using all of the space that you can. Something else that is really going to help out, if your pulls get a little higher than 6, somebody runs into a pat or does an accidental pull for you, absorb trinkets actually count as HP for bursting. So if you use an absorb trinket for 1 million, if 1 million is 20% of your HP, then that trinket can absorb 2 full stacks of bursting. Also, if you need to start staggering your kills because bursting is a little high or your pull was a little big, then start kiting the mobs and stunning them in order for DPS to take them down spaced out. One extremely important thing to drive home this week is to avoid any damage that is avoidable. If you pull a pack of 6 and get a quake during that pack, that is 80% of your maximum HP guaranteed as damage. There is no way you can avoid it. But if you walk into avoidable damage, that's the extra 20% to guarantee that you go down. So this week, it's very important that you avoid as much damage as you possibly can, because the 2 affixes this week are completely unavoidable. Now DPS this week, if the pulls are greater than 6 mobs, don't AoE all the mobs down together. AoE everything down to about 40 to 50% and then start picking 1 mob down at a time so that bursting is more spaced out, stacks don't get too high, and you don't guarantee a wipe. Make sure you spread out as best as you can, and when quaking does trigger, make sure you run away from everyone. If your HP is too low or the bursting stacks have gotten a little too high, start staggering the kills. Every now and then, you will have to completely stop DPS in order to guarantee that the group survives. It is very important that you avoid all avoidable damage this week since the affixes are unavoidable. Keep your interrupts handy to help your tank with damage taken. And also, don't cast anything at the end of any quaking debuff going off, because that will interrupt you, resulting in a very big loss of DPS. Heals. This week, bring water. You will need it. If you have any talents that you haven't picked up before that are very good at AoE healing, this week is the week to pick those up and start using them. The time where you need to focus on bigger AoE heals a lot more than others is when mobs start going down. So when bursting starts being handed out, that's when you should start tossing out big AoE heals in order to minimize the downtime between pulls. Make sure you're spread out and not hugging anyone else for quaking, and also make sure you're not casting at the end of any quaking so that you do not get interrupted. One last thing to note for healers is, since this week has a ton of unavoidable damage because of the affixes, do not be afraid to speak up and ask your tank to stop pulling so you can get a drink, because this week is very heavy on you and your mana. Overall, make the pulls this week less than 6 mobs, make sure your healer has enough mana before walking into the next pull, spread out, avoid all avoidable damage as much as you can since the affixes are 100% unavoidable, and stagger the kills if your pulls get too big or if bursting gets a little too out of hand. So start doing single target at that point. Now overall this week is very difficult. I would say 8 out of 10 difficulty for most pugs out there. And also this week, trying to meet a certain time requirement is going to be increased. However, since the patch went live today, There is no more 3 chests or 2 chests. It's mostly based around difficulty of the dungeon. So get out there and give this week a try, especially since keystones cannot be depleted anymore. So go out there, don't be afraid to use your keystone, give it a shot. But don't worry, this week is very difficult. I hope this helped out, and as always, good luck out there.